My name is Hitoshi Abe, and I'm a principal of Atelier Hitoshi Abe. This is an architectural firm in Sendai, Japan. But at the same time, I have a small office here called Atelier Hitoshi Abe Design Incorporated in LA. So I'm also in charge of this LA office. And also, I'm a professor at the Department of Architecture and Urban Design at UCLA. And I'm the director of XLab. That's a very small international think tank exploring the sort of expanding boundary of our profession, architecture and urban design. And also, I am a director of Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies. This is an organization to sort of support the research about Japan and also promote the research and the culture coming from Japan. So I kind of wear so many different hats, right? And also I'm of course a husband and also the father of three children. And it's kind of interesting that so many hats, and also working in Japan, working in US and somewhere else, and especially under this online situation, the identity sort of me is getting kind of more interesting. It's very much flux and it's multiple probably, and I kind of enjoy hopping around the different sort of responsibilities and different even the attitude or character. And I think right now that's where I am. That's a question I always ask, especially now we talk about like where you want to die, right? Where are you going to be the last place you will kind of go back, right? Especially with my wife. And we never actually had an answer. Sort of a very simple answer to that question is that I feel more attached where my family is located, right? So that means LA. And I feel I'm really connected to LA when I'm sitting in the backyard of my own house and looking at the trees and drinking wine and eating, some snack. And I feel like, this is such a nice kind of feeling about connection to LA. And probably at this moment, I think LA is more the place for me, but always what's interesting things about is that even though I'm in LA, feeling LA is a home, but there's always Japan. And it kind of works as some sort of a measuring point. So whenever I do something here, I always reflect it back to Japan, what it could have been or how it will be, right? So it's kind of interesting that even though I feel more attached to LA, but always the shadow of Japan. And I go back to Japan before pandemic, maybe once a month, right? So I was always there, going back and doing things, but still, I think LA has been my home, but still this kind of a sense of, I don't know, sort of being part of two worlds and sort of a sense of sort of being in between things or being in a kind of threshold of the two things is always there. So that actually always helped me to develop something and to think about something, and it always the basis maybe of my activity and my way of thinking, I guess. Maybe about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, I was asked to answer to the survey by Los Angeles Times. What is your most favorite houses in Los Angeles. At least 10 houses. So I gave, Eames house and all these names. But then for the number one, I gave the name of the house designed by John Lautner in Palm Springs. It's called Elrod House. This house is known by its shape. It's like a flying saucer shape. And it has a gigantic swimming pool coming into the house, and there's a huge rock in the middle of the living room. But this house was also famous because of the 007 movie. That's where the 007 fight against the two female assassins in a swimming pool. I told this, at times that this house is probably the best house in LA because that really created the image of life in US and also promoted it throughout the world. And then the article was out, and then I got the email from the owner of this Elrod house. That time, he owned many houses, and that was just one of the property he had. And he said, "Oh, thank you very much writing about this house. Would you like to stay?" I said, "Sure, I'd like to stay. And then my 50th year birthday is coming. Can I stay there with my friends and maybe a couple of days so I can really spend time and enjoy the space?" So he said, "Of course." So I went there, right? Spent a couple of days with friends and my family. It's a beautiful house. Then that evening, the first evening, I was sitting in the middle of this round-shaped living room looking over this beautiful valley in Palm Springs. And then thought, why don't I call my father? Because this is a house that I watched in this 007 movie. That was a movie that I watched in a movie theater for the first time when I was 10 years old. And my father took me. And it was the first time also for me to watch movie outside of a house with my dad. And I had no idea why actually he took 10 years old boy to watch 007 movie with lots of improper expression, included in it. So I called him and then said, "Hey, do you know where I am now?" And he, blah, blah, blah. At the end, he didn't know actually. He didn't remember anything about the movie or anything. But then all of a sudden, I thought, wait a minute. I remember I wanted to be the architect when I was around 11 years old. And I remember watching this house, because I still remember it. It's a round shape. And the first house I designed at the college, just the first project, was round. And I came here for the grad school, right? LA. And I still have some kind of inspiration about the desert and so on. Then all of a sudden, the whole story started to be connected. And then I felt like the ring or circle closed. And then I said, oh my God, maybe I'm here being the chair of the department and practicing in LA, coming from Japan, is because of this house and all this movie he took. I didn't really see that way until that moment. And I kind of recognized that happened to me while I was sitting in that big round shape sort of a living room. And so until then, I kept telling everybody, I remember I was telling everybody I want to be the architect around 11, but I don't remember why. Maybe somebody brainwashed me or whatever. But now, probably or most likely, I was totally influenced by 007 movie and by this house by John Lautner. Of course, there's a common things and there's a totally different things. But if you compare between LA and Sendai, which is a northern city where I'm from. I was born, I was raised, and I was educated. It's really different. Sendai is a typical sort of a city in a countryside, right, which is a center of northern part of Japan. And it was actually the largest city and closest city to the epicenter of the earthquake 10 years ago and tsunami. And very comfortable city to live with public transportation, and everything is in a walking distance, and there's a nature and so on. And so when I came to LA for the first time, that was my first trip to outside of Japan. I felt, wow, I came to the wildness. Wildness meaning I thought that the city that I know, mostly, right, the Japan, is more sort of domesticated. You feel like you are almost inside of your own domestic environment, like a house, even though you're outside. But here, city was more raw, much raw. That was back in the late 80s, right? Raw. And everything looked to me very wild, and almost you were in the jungle without anything to protect you. But at the same time, there's an incredible freedom also I felt, because in a domestic environment, there's so many things that controls you and strain you and everything. But here I felt it's almost like you were sitting in a desert with a huge, vast sort of openness, right? So I felt also this big freedom. And I think also the weather helped me to feel that way, because there's no rain and then it's very dry and you can run without feeling uncomfortable. So that's the big differences, that the very domesticated, comfortable, but very constrained environment versus the very dry, open, wild, but full of sort of a freedom. And it's I feel still same way, even though LA started to be more domesticated. The big difference is I felt when I came back 2007. Actually, I went back to Japan 2000. When was that? 1992, right after how many years? 5 or 6 years of stay. And then when I came back, it's been like 15 years or something like that passed. I realized, one, the car is cleaner than before and more congested. There are many people walking on the street. Color of the car used to be more colorful, like there's a crazy green or red or yellow, but now mostly black and silver and white. There are so many people everybody can use chopsticks. Back then, there are some people who could use chopsticks, but you had to teach them or you had to explain what this sushi is about. But after 15 years, no question, everybody is using chopsticks as if it's a knife and fork. And it was so strange to see that, but at the same time, interesting to see that how much culturally, the LA evolved in a way. So it's more multicultural. I mean, even some Japanese term became English, like edamame, omakase, daikon radish, and all these things is used as English now. But also the many people on the street, then indicating the densities and cleaner cars, everything is also indicating that the way that the city is coordinated in the entire structure of the society is different from before, meaning more constrained, maybe more controlled in some way. There's less room of freedom from 20 years ago. So it's kind of interesting to go back and forth between two cultures, but also a sort of a experience the time passing and see that how one place kind of changes its characteristic. The architecture education is really different between US and Japan. Just simply talking, Japan educates people in the architecture school to be raised as somebody might be involved in some sort of architecture business, not necessarily architect. Here, architecture school is the school to basically raise architects, right? So this is more specific to teach the techniques and the way of thinking to become architect, and there's a curriculum, right, dictated by accreditation board and so on. So you have to actually learn certain things based on the curriculum. But Japan, only maybe 5% of the class will be the architect. 95% will be somebody working for a contractor, somebody working for some research institute, doing architecture, or totally maybe unrelated to architecture. And that creates the sort of education system more general, and also, interestingly enough, more research-based, because the whole sort of system is divided by the laboratory, specialized in each different kind of a special sort of topics: urban design, planning, or structure, or mechanical engineering, material, and so on. So they dictates the whole curriculum. So you have to be part of the laboratories, and you will learn under the one professor doing research. So so the research-based education versus based education creates such a really different kind of culture. So the Japanese one, people see architecture as more like in a general sense in a school, and then sort of see the architecture as a discipline with a multiple kind of characteristic or the definition. It's not focused to the one definition of the discipline. So in a way, it has a lot of flexibility and the possibility to think about the architecture, but at the same time, it's really hard to get the particular information, focused information, if you want to be the architect. US is the opposite. You will learn very specific information to be the architect, and you will learn, right? You will see many people as a role model to learn how to be the architect. But at the same time, because it's encapsulated within the defined definition of the profession, so it's really difficult to get out from there, to redefine what's really necessary to think about the future to come. So it's a really interesting sort of juxtaposition of the two systems. To be honest, combining two will be the best. And that's what I tried to do when I was a chair 5 years ago. My mentor was and is still the Wolf Briggs at the Copemoblow. I met him at Sire when I was a student. And then he hired me. So I worked for him almost 5 years. And in LA. I didn't go to Vienna. There's an office back then in LA in a small garage. And he came in once in a while, and I was there with people he brought in from Vienna. And as a really young architect, it was good to be in this kind of small environment. And when Wolf was here, he had enough time to kind of teach me lessons, personal lessons. And also, he was a professor, right? Before, and then after he became boss, he continued to teach me. And also, I was lucky because there was a project in Japan, and I had to kind of run it. So I traveled to Japan with him, and so he taught me a lot, especially not the design. I mean, he said, don't do Hemoblau. And he tried to teach me sort of how to say, the mindset to be an architect. And also, how to say that, how to, like, trying, importance of the mindset, trying to be innovator always and not the imitator. And that was something that I learned from him. And we still kind of communicate. And yeah, whenever he comes in, we meet. And yeah, I think I was just lucky back then, so that I learned met somebody that I don't have to emulate to build or to design, but I could respect and learn the attitude, right, that I can continue to pursue. So.
And maybe do you consider you have other people that maybe you didn't met in person that also you are thinking about them? Also outside of architecture, maybe?
I mean, first of all, there are many people that I respect. I mean, first of all, your friends and your colleagues are good guys that you learn from, right? So, for instance, my colleague Greg Lin, who is now the CEO of the Piaggio Fast Forward, and he's developing robots. And I always respect his open mind towards sort of a reinventing architecture itself. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but he continued to sort of reinvent what he does and what the architecture means and so on. And I do admire that. And also, I met people in a different context. So I don't know who I should point out. I mean, I can name like probably 50 people, right? John Lochner is great. I mean, for the obvious reason. And I admired, even Frank Lloyd Wright, Cove, and I don't know. But still at this moment, the people that I admire most is the people who try to redefine the field that you're working in. And I don't know right now in architecture if I know more people. I don't know who else. But also, don't get me wrong, my colleague Newtonari, who lives near my house. Actually, we live in like maybe about 1 minute away to each other by walk. And I do respect. I mean, he's a pioneer of this folded forms and a particular. I mean, I think I have to say one of the most influential sort of a designer or architect about the form that making current architecture as it is. And I I do really also, respect him and also his attitude towards a profession, which is more, in a way, traditional and more focused, but very, very refined and tuned. So, kind of funny. I didn't have any intention to talk about my two good friends, but um, yeah, probably yes. The if you ask about the influence, maybe I have to talk about these two, as we meaning myself and my office, expanding sort of a area we work outside of the traditional sort of a design, and you run into people that you even don't know doing some interesting businesses or doing some sort of a interesting sort of research on the technology. And those are also the people that are really interesting to talk about. Recently, we are involved in sort of a conceptual design of the new city. And there are so many sort of interesting sort of a way of thinking to create the big paradigm shift in the way we think about the city. And I think I cannot talk about this because I signed on an NDA, but I have a little hope actually that maybe we can still progress, we can make more breakthrough towards a much sort of a at least a more evolved environment, and hopefully in a better way, so that the people's life are will be more improved than now. I'm not sure if I can guarantee that, but I feel like I'm in such kind of a flow towards that direction because of the involvement of those real projects. So I still, so sort of architects that maybe the generation before, at least in Japan, they had a really sort of a negative sort of attitude towards urban design and making environment to make the society better, because they had too much story like that from the one before. Right, Kenzo Tange and those people, Kurokisho Kurakawa, thought that they can change the world, but through architecture and urban design, and didn't work that well. So that generation after that, like Toyo Ito, Ando, they are not particularly interested in the city, and they are more focusing on to the architecture and the form and the space, like artists. And that trend came till almost my generation. But now I feel though, I think there's still sort of an interesting sort of a hope that we can still sort of redefine the our profession, and then there's an opportunity for us to be involved in the design of the new city, which can change the way that we live, and that can change the relationship of human and nature. And there's still a lot of possibility, and that's where I am at this moment. And through that, you have to collaborate with so many people, and you see so many interesting people, right, doing something super interesting. For instance, we ran into this guy who created Pokemon Go. And the Pokemon Go can instantly gather like 100,000 people in one spot without using any piece of construction. Or there's a guy that who really thinking about new idea about how to design the public space, and the name is Wikitopia. Like a Wikipedia creates the meaning dictionary as a collective. He's trying to find a way to create the town as a collective, not top down. So these are totally different sort of approach about the space and human activities and the city, but still it is. And I get so excited about such things, and I really want to work with them. So right now I'm in a kind of a position to sort of interact with them and then, investigate such a possibilities, and that excites me at this moment. So hopefully I could explain what I'm up to, and it's a really interesting time. I was working in LA at the Copenhagen, and then 1991, my wife was pregnant, so she decided to deliver the baby in Japan. So I took a 2 month off from Copenhagen and went back to Japan, 1992, to be there. Right. So my son was born January 17, 1992. But then I realized that I had nothing to do, because you were there, but in Japan, your wife will stay in a hospital, and also she went back to her house, like her parents' house. So I had to there was not much enough space. I stayed in my parents' house, so I decided to join the competition of the stadium. I didn't think we're gonna win, but actually we won. And then that's the stadium for 50,000 people for the national game will happen. And then actually that's a stadium also used for the World Cup soccer game, 2002. So all of a sudden, the young guy won this big competition, and I had a year to prepare my own office and kick off. So it took me 8 years to complete the whole project, but that's how I started my office. So it's kind of strange that I had maybe the largest office in my whole career at the beginning, and the largest project in my career at the beginning. And I feel that I was lucky, but also I feel like my whole career is kind of reversed. So the funny thing is that usually most of people work so hard trying to establish this office and the architecture that you admire. But my case, it's completely reversed. So I was given that already, and I did. Because the project coming with a lot of budget, I could do a lot. Therefore, probably right now my pursuit towards sort of more flexible boundary of the professions and redefining of the architecture is because at the beginning I was given already what the architecture that everybody will think about, and I did already this big projects, and then also anything in between the furniture to that stadium. So I'm more eager to reinvent that, and then want to really see what else we can do rather than pursuing large, big projects. Here, basically, office is rather small, and established to support the office in Japan, right? So, but the funny thing happened was when I opened up the office here, because I really needed to help. I mean, I need to have somebody to help me to communicate with the office in Japan because there are so many things that I have to do. So I needed this office. But then after I opened this office, we won a big competition in Europe, and then we had to do that from here. Then after that, we got series of larger projects. So we continued to do it in LA. So all of a sudden, there's a two office active. I didn't see much of the differences between two locations in terms of sort of a proceeding and prosecuting all the projects. Of course, there's a differences in the way you draw, drawings, and in the way that actually you actually hire people, or those details are different. But maybe if I say the biggest differences between Japan and elsewhere is a relationship with the contractor. In Japan, contractor is on your side, and they actually collaborate with you to investigate and pursue certain detail. And the drawing architect provides less. It's almost like a DD set here. And then the contractor redo the whole CD sets. And during that time, you can actually work with them to polish it. So you see lots of sort of incredible building in Japan because the relationship, and of course it's changing. It started to get much more like a US, but still that collaboration between architects and the contractor is there, and also completely backed up with the some sort of a craftsmanship that exists in the contractor's mentality. So, you can do something incredible there, not because of you, but because of this relationship. Yeah, it's really, if you work there, the project in Japan, work with a contractor, unless you are really unlucky, you will know. But remember I told you that the architectural school, only 5% become architect, and many goes to the contractor. So they are not the enemies, but they are the classmates. They share the same culture. So that probably is one of the reasons also that this collaboration is kind of possible.
That's interesting. And do you think it's harder maybe for architects from outside Japan to build in Japan because of that relationship?
Probably. It depends, right? But you have to kind of see how things works. I mean, as always, right? When you want to work also here, coming from Japan, you have to know how to do it. Same thing. But I think the communication will be the problem. So you need some sort of a mediator or translator in a way. Well, I wake up and then I have a office in my house inside of my garage now. So I don't have to commute, right? And then I check my computer and then I work. First thing is I work with my assistant who is in Kazakhstan at this moment. So first meeting is with her because of the time. So it's 11 o'clock in Kazakhstan and 9 o'clock my time. We talk about it. And then, after that I have a meeting with my staff in LA. And sometimes they come, or sometimes they are all online. So they work at home. Then after that, I go back to my house and cook my lunch, and then comes out. And then can I do work? Around sometime, actually, I have a meeting from like 3 o'clock early morning in Japan, and with this big corporation, talk about the, city design, urban planning things. And because it's a big project, it happens maybe 3 times a week. Then after that, the 5 o'clock is a 9 o'clock in Japan. So I have a meeting with my Japan office or my client. So from 5 to maybe 8 or 9, that's the time that I get kind of busy because it's basically 9 to 12 in Japan. So also, as I told you that I have a different hats, right? That's my office part. So the teaching lately, of course, happens also online. And one day was like that. I had to wake up 6 o'clock to be the jury of the competition in Saudi Arabia. After that, I had to log into the website again to teach at the students at the Yale, because that's East Coast time. Then lunchtime, I had to have a meeting with the people in the Japan house to talk about this program we are doing, this rethinking of Ma. So it's a talk show to talk about the Japanese concept about time and space. Then after that, I had to have a meeting with Japan Center, Terasaki Center, to talk about establishment of the new award to honor somebody who contributed to the U.S.-Japan relationship a lot, and we would like to honor her. So that kind of conversation. And then 2 o'clock, I had to teach my own studio at UCLA. Then after that, the meeting with Japan kicks off. From 5, I have a meeting with my own office. 6 o'clock, I have a meeting with my client. So lately, the weird thing is that everything is so flat, so that I do teach, I do also work for my office, and then I also watch entertainment, and I also at the same time, right, I'm with my family, right? So I cook, and within 10-meter parameters, this typical day is showing that I work, I teach, I design, and also I sort of entertain, interact with my friends. Actually, we do this kind of a Zoom party, right? You just have a drink with your friend through Zoom, and all of these things happening on this screen or within a 10-meter perimeter, right? So I also cook my family, I talk to my son, but everything happens in such small area, and I started to feel it's okay. I mean, maybe it's okay that I don't have to go out like I used to be. And I don't think this, I think this change will be more permanent. And it changes the way people behave. It changes the way that the city functions or the whole society works. And it's kind of interesting to think that how we can actually also take this kind of change as a chance to reinvent again ourselves and to reinvent the system and to reinvent the city and the architecture we are in. And it's always kind of interesting to me to think about new challenges and, something to be innovative about. I'm very much interested in teaching the way to reinvent design and the framework of architecture. So when I teach, I always ask students to think about much larger framework, which is usually the basis of the design. So for instance, until last year, I was initiating a studio called the Workhouse Studio. And this studio was based on the sort of hypothesis that the city and architecture now is based on the separation of the domestic and the work environment. However, in this past 10 years, these two environments started to be reunited together, started to be mixed together. So that means this is a signal that probably there will be the large paradigm shift happens in this environment we are living in now. So what do you do in this situation? So students were asked to design the program of the environment or the building and then turn it into some kind of business proposal. In the other words, that the students were asked to really design the mechanism to prove the sustainability of your own project and how it could happen and how it could stay in this current context. And then start the actual design in connection to this business sort of a concept. And so we brought in the professors from business school to teach how to write the business proposal. And then so it becomes like a pitch to the investors. And then based on that, they have to actually pick the site, has to define the design and propose it together with a business proposal. And in this case, what's really interesting things about is that the students really has to prove the reality of their own design in relationship to this new sort of a context arising. And we bring in also the business people and also technology people to join the review and give some kind of criticism about their business proposal and the reality that they are presenting. So now we shifted to this new studio called the Fire City, and I kicked off this new initiative together with the 11 university in Pacific Rim and pursuing architecture and urban design for disaster risk reduction and resiliency. So that each school is focusing on local disasters, and our case is a fire. So we are focusing on the fire in California. And then same things, we are asking students to come up with a strategy to reduce the risk of fire and increase the resiliency of the community and society. And what kind of strategy and a method or new way of thinking can be effective. And then ask them to draw the master plan, and then ask them to design one of the building in the master plan. So I'm more interested in sort of in the sense that the architecture before it becomes a building. We could say strategy, or we could say more like a business plan, but basically by connecting different sort of resources and the values exist in a society and then turn it into the new value. And I really want to teach students how to do that, because if you know how to do that, then you can be really sort of self-sustainable designer, and you will know that how to push yourself in this kind of a world and to be the leader of the profession, not somebody working for famous architect. hardest thing to learn is still, right, simply how to run the business. I don't know if I ever learned it. I kind of survives, but it's always difficult. But also it's a very boring answer. Um, what I really want to learn right now is, again, how to really sort of turn this vision of the future into the reality. It's a very vague statement, but there's so much opportunities and there's so much sort of a interesting vision. But if unless you know how to connect it to the reality, it's nothing. And still, I don't really know that how we can turn this kind of a, let's say, the hopeful vision towards the future into the reality yet. And yeah, if you ask me what I want to learn, I want to learn that